I calibrated headsets for a living. 22 years of it, if you count the training tier. And not one day of it felt like anything a man should be proud of. The Orient Concourse ran 400 immersion booths across 3 levels, each one wired into a neural link that read a patron's want and built it for them out of light and sensation. And my job was to make sure the read was clean before the syndicate let anyone strap in. Blue for standard, amber for a flagged anomaly, usually a migraine or a pacemaker. Gold I had never once seen, not in 22 years. And I didn't know there was a gold until the morning Tessa's routine host calibration lit the diagnostic panel like a struck match. She worked floor 6, sensation host, badge said 6, then a line of identical badges. Company called them hosts because host sounded better than what they actually did, which was strap into the link first, every morning, so the machine had a clean baseline before 400 strangers climbed into their own fantasies. Tessa did it without complaint, without much of anything on her face at all. The way you do a job you've decided not to hate out loud. Bronze copper skin, dark auburn hair cut close, amber eyes with a narrow pupil that never quite matched human proportions, though nobody on the concourse floor looked twice. Off-world workers were common enough in Threnody. Nobody asked where she was from. Nobody asked her real name, because the badge already had one printed on it, and printed names don't invite questions. The gold flag came up at 6:14 that morning and my supervisor was standing behind me inside 4 minutes. Recalibrate and reset, he said. Sensor ghost. We had a batch of them last spring. I'd run that batch last spring. This wasn't that. A ghost reading flickers and dies inside a second. This one held steady for 11 seconds, clean and bright, structured the way a real signature structures. Not noise, architecture. I'd spent 2 decades learning the difference between a machine lying to me and a machine telling me something true, and this reading was telling me something true. Purge it, he said, when I didn't move fast enough, and don't log the raw file. Just the corrected read. Legal doesn't want a repeat conversation with the last one of these. I asked what the last one of these had been. He didn't answer. He just watched until I'd overwritten the display file, then he left, satisfied. What he didn't watch was my hand pulling the raw capture onto a drive the size of my thumbnail before I wiped the console. I told myself it was habit. Any tech worth his wage keeps a backup. That was true enough to let me sleep on it. I didn't say anything to her that day. I said something the next one, when she came through calibration again, and the read held gold a second time. Just as clean, just as certain. And I understood then, it wasn't a glitch at all. It was her. Every single morning. And the machine had been telling the truth the whole time, while men above me told it to lie. Thessaly, I said. Not Tessa. The full shape of it, the way the file underneath the badge had spelled it before somebody trimmed it down to fit a name tag. She went very still. Off-world eyes don't water the way ours do, but hers went bright and hard, the way glass goes bright right before it holds instead of breaking. Where did you find that? She said, quiet, not a question so much as a test. Nowhere I was told to look, I said. It was just under what they had me erase. She didn't confirm anything that day, and I didn't ask her to. But she started coming to calibration 10 minutes early, and I started staying 10 minutes late, and somewhere in those 20 stolen minutes across 3 weeks she told me, in pieces, what a gold reading actually was. A bloodline command signature, the kind carried by a sitting or fallen royal house, keyed to a court's authentication grid so an heir could never be substituted or faked. House Voss had fallen 9 years back. A coup dressed up as a succession dispute. Every recorded heir declared dead within the season. She hadn't corrected the record. Dead women don't get hunted. My supervisor started asking why the 6th floor host calibration was running long. I told him equipment drift. I kept the drive in a sealed sample case in my own locker, not the syndicate storage. And every week I checked it still read gold, because some nights I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing and needed the machine to tell me again that I hadn't. There were small things I could do and I did them. I moved her booth rotation off the schedule slots that ran during the syndicate's investor walkthroughs, so she was never standing in a badge line when men in good coats came through counting profit per floor. I logged her overtime under a diagnostics code instead of a name, so nobody skimming payroll would notice a host working longer hours than the others without asking why. None of it was much. It was the kind of small that doesn't feel like anything while you're doing it, and only adds up to something when you look back at the whole stretch of weeks at once. A man came through floor 6 on a Thursday asking after displaced court staff, polite as a customs officer, showing a printed manifest with no names on it, only physical descriptors. Bronze-toned skin, narrow pupil amber eyes. He wasn't wearing a syndicate badge, and he didn't ask me anything directly. He asked the booth attendant 2 stations down, loud enough to carry. and I watched Tessa's shoulders go a fraction stiller without her turning around. I told him our hosts were under contract confidentiality, and that physical descriptors weren't something I was authorized to discuss, which was true enough to satisfy him for exactly as long as it took him to leave the floor. She didn't thank me for it. She didn't have to. We both understood what he'd been counting on the manifest, and what it would have cost her if I'd answered differently. The syndicate found out about the reading anyway, the way these things always surface, not through me, but through a floor rumor that reached the wrong ears 3 tiers up, and word came down that legal wanted the host reassigned to a back corridor, quietly, before the rumor found a reporter or a bounty office. I watched her badge get pulled from the schedule board on a Tuesday with no explanation given, and I understood they meant to make her disappear a second time, gentler than the coup had, but just as final. A dead woman filed twice stays dead. That was the whole of their plan, and it would have worked, if the plan hadn't also required shutting down the one diagnostic record that proved she'd ever been anything other than a badge number to begin with. The floor went into full overload 40 minutes later. 400 linked headsets pulling simultaneous load off one power spine, a fault nobody had caught because nobody had been watching the diagnostics closely enough since the syndicate's attention had moved to burying a woman instead of running a concourse. The spine started climbing past every safety threshold I had, and every override I tried bounced back locked, because the system's root shutdown had always required an authenticated command key nobody currently on the floor possessed. Nobody except her. She came down from the back corridor before I'd even called for her, like she'd felt the load shift in her own signature the way you feel a held breath go wrong. I handed her the drive without a word. She pressed her palm to the auth panel, and I watched the display recognize what I'd spent 3 weeks refusing to erase. Recognize her, fully. The gold signature confirming against the panel instead of a syndicate report. 400 booths powering down clean. Patrons walking out confused and unharmed and never knowing how close the floor had come. The interstellar registry doesn't move fast for anyone, but a verified command key activation on a public safety grid gets flagged whether the syndicate wants it seen or not. Within the week, an inquiry opened. Within the month, the record I'd refused to purge became the exhibit that reopened what everyone had called a settled death 9 years prior. House Voss had no throne left to restore, no court left standing to kneel, but the registry ratified what the drive had never stopped saying, that Thessaly Corin Voss was alive, was who she was, and that whatever came next for a house with no seat left, it came to her by right and not by rumor. She kept working the concourse a while longer, though not the corridor and not the badge. She asked me, once the inquiry closed, whether I'd known that whole first morning what I was keeping. I told her the truth. I hadn't known what it was, I'd only known it was true, and that a man doesn't get to decide a true reading is inconvenient just because somebody above him says so. She said that was the whole of it then. That was all recognition had ever needed to be.